he was an ex-policeman, an army man, he was an alcoholic, and he was actually living with this woman, and we struggled really with him to try and teach him the gospel, and struggled with him to try and, you know, deal with some of his social issues and some of his alcoholic problems. And we didn't know, you know, really how we were going to make a breakthrough with that. And we spent some time, a group of us, praying about that. And within, I think it was a matter of days, he came to us and said that he wanted to obey the gospel, that he was going to separate from the girl he was living with. She was going to go back and live with her mother. He was going to stay in the house they were in. They were going to get married 6 months down the line, and eventually she became a Christian and they moved.
I was in a congregation where there was a family that had a foster child, and the foster child had been terribly neglected by his mother as an infant. And if you saw this child, you would think he was a lot younger than he actually was, because he just had a lot of physical problems that had come from early on. And one of his problems was his immune system was totally shot. So any fever, literally, any fever could kill him.
He was out real late on his motorcycle. This was years ago. And he was down at the Bolins an evening with the young people, you know. And so he left there about 1 o'clock. Well, I am just pacing the floor. Here it is, 1 o'clock, and he's out someplace on his motorcycle, and I just paced the floor, praying that everything would go well.
I remember I was making this one phone call, and I was desperately praying that God would bless us with it. Another piano tuning, which we really needed. And God went over and above the call of duty, you might say, and this lady didn't want her piano tuned. And I said, okay, well, that's fine. Would you like me to call you back next year? And she said, well, no, not really. She said, I actually want to buy another piano.
The father asked that we would pray for David because he was sick and he had a fever. And we all knew what, he didn't even have to say any more about it. We knew what that meant. And so I led the congregation in a prayer for David's healing and his protection. And we ended our time together and went home. Well, during lunch, I get a call. I get a call from David's foster mom, and she asked me if I knew when we prayed for David. And it just so happened I knew exactly when we prayed for David. And I told her, and she said, that's when I found his fever broke.
But not wanting him to know that. And as soon as I heard, I was in an apartment building and I could hear the motorcycle come in. And then of course I relaxed. And so the next day I said to him, Jim, did anything happen last night around 1 o'clock that, you know, was different? And he said, yeah, I was just leaving the Bolins and got on the highway and a guy cut me off just at the time that I was praying, pacing the floor.
I want a grand piano, a nice piano that's got nice furniture and everything. And it just so happened that my husband had inherited a piano of this very nature from a customer who he'd been really kind to, and this customer had given him his piano and he'd fixed it up, and now this lady was looking for a piano just as this. So I told her about the piano and she said, oh, I want to come and see it. So the next day she came and saw it. She said, my husband says I can buy it if I like it. And she bought it. And, you know, I've never forgotten that, because God, over and above, supplied.
And if you had asked anyone in that congregation, was that an answer to our prayers, everybody would have agreed. The answers to my prayers have not always been so dramatic. In fact, sometimes the answer hasn't looked exactly like what it was I was praying for, although always better, always better than what I prayed for. But that incident, for me, has just been a sort of a peg that whenever I am tempted to doubt that my prayers make any difference, I remember.
It seems to me that for God to actually berate us to be more constant in prayer is the highest compliment that he could give us, and the greatest opportunity that he could give us. Where you consider that what he has said is that if you'll carry on the conversation with me, you can change the direction of the world. Jesus talked about moving mountains. Well, can you imagine having a part in redirecting the history of the world? And that's exactly what God promises us.
To me, that was a circumstance really there that we couldn't have engineered that. We really didn't know where we were going with that. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, you know, this guy just becomes convicted and finds the power, you know, to do this. And from that day to this, he's never touched another drop, I think, of alcohol.
Just by saying in general, I have found throughout my life that doors have opened evangelistically. Doors have opened for me when I have prayed about it, and they haven't when I haven't prayed. I think about William Temple, a British preacher, who said, some people say that prayer is, answers to prayer just coincidence. And he said, all I know is that when I pray, I have a lot of coincidences, and when I don't pray, I don't have a lot of coincidences.
Over and over and over. I've had so many prayers answered, and it's wonderful.